And so that's perfect. And then in that's in a row, we get that done. Okay. And okay. Perfect. We are currently live already. And then awesome, awesome.
Impressive.
Impressive. All these technologies, right?
I know. I'm impressed, Traei.
Yeah. So there we go. I've shared it to my Her Stories technologies, right?
I know. I'm impressed, Traei.
So there we go. I've shared it. Okay. Can you still hear me?
I can.
Okay, perfect. So we are live at this moment.
Woohoo!
So, welcome everybody. Happy afternoon. My name is Traei, and I am the founder and author of Her Stories Untold, a global book project empowering and inspiring stories of women around the globe from all walks of life. Now, the reason that I started this project was because I realized there are women out there that have stories to share, journeys that have been taken, but not really realizing their significance and importance. So this project is open to all women and transgender women in the globe. I do live talks with men as well. So if you have a story of your journey of how you came to be, whom and where you are today, please do check out www.herstoriesuntold.com. Again, I emphasize this global book project is to empower, uplift, and inspire other women and men and people from all groups from all walks of life. Now, before I begin our talk today, I want to acknowledge that the land on which I live and work is the traditional and unceded territory of the Kwikwetlem Nation and lies within the territory traditional territories and salute to Katsiap Muskim Squamish Kikit. And here we are. We have a very amazing, wonderful woman in front of us today, our very special guest, Jane Lee Rankin. I'm just going to read about a bit about her, Jane's bio. So to kind of just introduce her in. So Lee here is a farmer and founder of the Apple Hill Farm, an award-winning first-generation farm in the is it Appalachian?
Appalachian.
Yeah, Mount Carolina. Lee for farmers through her leadership and involvement in the North Carolina Agritourism Networking Association. She frequently speaks about the farm tourism and the benefits of diversifying farm portfolios at conferences locally and nationally. And in 2021, Lee won runner-up for the North Carolina Small Farmer of the Year. And that's not what Lee's about. There's more to it behind it. So that's why we're having this wonderful talk today. So, our whole the theme of our talk today is the story of a solo mom's pursuit of a dream to start an alpaca farm, right? And Lee's gonna tell us more about that. So welcome here, Lee.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's really great to be here.
Thank you for being here. Um, yes, and yeah, can you tell us a little bit more, starting with what happened to you and, kind of why did you want to start sharing your story, essentially?
So I needed to share this story because it's such a powerful story of a woman and a single mom. And way back when this story started, which was I found it out that I was pregnant and I was just dating somebody. So it wasn't necessarily the best of circumstances. I was in a small town, my hometown, well, not a small town, but a big town, Louisville, Kentucky, a little bit more conservative than some other towns. And it was a little bit of a challenge that I was pregnant out of wedlock. So the story starts there. And then after there was time for my father and his father to have a chance to jump in or not jump in, and it was obvious that it was not going to be a great situation. I had met an alpaca with my son. Actually, we met him together, met the alpaca together, and had come up with this dream of starting an alpaca farm. And so we went off on a journey to find a new place to live to start an alpaca farm. And so it's a real journey story. It's a story of a woman's journey to raise a son in a safe environment,
Yeah.
to find something for me to do while I raised a child by myself. And it ended up being like the perfect thing to do.
Yeah, and I want to just kind of insert here what Angela May from the New York Times bestselling co-author of The Islanders had said about your book. She says it's an inspiring and relatable story about trying to discover who you are and what you really want in life, despite the odds and naysayers. And it's essentially what you just capture, your soul-finding journey, right? Beginning with your
Hmm.
and an
Hmm.
alpaca, right? So that's
Right.
that's really beautiful. So essentially, you mentioned that essentially you started your journey when you received the news that you're pregnant, right? So, and then how, the circumstances were not fully ideal at the time. Did you want to share a little bit about that?
So yeah, so when I found out that I was pregnant, I was also a recent breast cancer survivor. So I was a year and a half away from having been diagnosed with breast cancer and going through treatment for breast cancer. And for those of you who've ever had cancer, know somebody that's had cancer, they really do not want you getting pregnant. Like that's an absolute no-no when you've just had cancer. And usually it's not an issue because most people get cancer later in their lives. So it's not necessarily a concern, especially with breast cancer. And I had made choices around the breast cancer. One of the things I figured out as soon as I was diagnosed and started to ask questions was that my chance of going into early menopause was as high as my not having a reoccurrence with chemo. And I still wanted to have children. I was 37 years old. I still wanted that as a dream of mine was to have children. I was not married, I was single. So it was sort of a far away kind of thing, but I didn't want to shut down that possibility. So I made choices along the way to leave that possibility open. And anyway, so it makes it for an interesting story because it's a very, so really in some ways I kind of took my life in my hands to carry a child. In certain people's eyes. In other people's eyes I wasn't. And that's part of the tension of the story, right?
Yeah, I read that snippet in your book where you said you found out that you had cancer, and the first question that you had asked was, "Can I still have children?" Right?
Right.
And you touched
Right.
on and
Right.
then navigating how you had to make intentional choices about, your treatment options,
Mm-hmm.
and then
Mm-hmm.
looked for, top surgeons, in New York City, as well as cancer treatments that was holistic, supported, right? So that to support your
Right.
immune system
Right.
and then
Right.
keeping the door open of having children, right? So,
Right.
I loved how you shared that, I mean, this isn't the plan for everybody and doesn't work, but for you, you shared that you cut out sugars and carbs in your diet so that it doesn't feed any of the cancer cells in your body. And then
Right.
yeah, so I just thought that was really beautiful. And so I did some digging and I was reading about, some statistics from various credible sources like cancer.ca, cancer.gov, all those places, WebMD. And they mentioned that the breast cancer survival rates can vary based on many factors, right? Depending on the stage of the cancer, the
Right.
individual's overall health, and the specific treatment plan. Now, I'm not here to speak on the opinion of medical, opinions and whatnot kind of thing, but
Right.
they did mention that in a general 5-year survival rate for women diagnosed with breast cancers is around 89%. So, this rate includes all women with breast cancer, regardless of the stage or treatment methods. Now,
Mm-hmm.
however, a specific study found that the 5-year overall survival rate was 98.6% for women receiving chemotherapy plus hormone therapy, and 97.3% for women in the hormone therapy alone group. Now, this suggests that some women may be able to forego chemotherapy and still have a
Right.
higher
Right.
survival rate. And then, of course, it's dependent on individual circumstances and,
Right.
their
Right.
provider opinions, expertise, whatnot, kind of thing. So, yeah, yeah. And I think you were chatting, and you mentioned that things have evolved much, right?
Yeah, so that was a quarter of a century ago, right? To put it in context. And cancer treatment is so different now. It is like light years ahead of where it was then. And it will continue to grow, right? I mean, I know people who, when they're diagnosed with cancer, they take cancer cells and they test it against different chemos. And they'll say, these three chemos will not work for you because your cancer is not responding when we test it, but these two chemos will actually hit the cancer that you have. And they weren't doing that back then
Mm,
in 1997, 1998. I mean, that was not, in fact, I was part of the study that was done where they were testing taking just the sentinel lymph node because when I was diagnosed was when they were still taking all your lymph nodes and testing them. And there was a study where they were testing one lymph node who was sort of it was called the sentinel lymph node, and he was the manager, she was the manager, and would then take the cancer cells and then divvy it out to the other lymph nodes. So if that first lymph node was negative 99.9% of the time, there was no more cancer in the other lymph nodes. So at that point, like after I had surgery, within 4 months, 3 months, they were doing the new surgery where they just took the one lymph node out. And if it was non cancerous, it was benign, they didn't take any more lymph nodes out. So people didn't end up with um, is it edema, where your arm swells and all the things that you can get lymphedema when you take lymph nodes out. So it was a radical time in terms of the science of breast cancer and taking lymph nodes or not taking lymph nodes.
yeah.
Um, and it was a huge difference in the incision. So if they took all the lymph nodes, they literally cut completely under your arm,
Mm.
and if they took one, they just cut a 1 inch space to get that one lymph node out. So it's fascinating, right? It's fascinating to see how science, but you can imagine that was 25 years ago. So where are we now, 25 years forward, with all the computing ability and data ability that we have now that's like just unbelievable compared to what we had then?
It's so fascinating how science continues to evolve, like, so that's why there are things that, you would do completely different now should the situation
Hmm.
happen,
Right.
versus, at that moment in time. And this triggered a memory of mine. I remember maybe more than 10 years ago, I was reading a magazine. And there was a story about a woman that was diagnosed with breast cancer. So she said one day she received a telephone call from the clinics, alerting her that she had breast cancer, right? And it was very
Right.
aggressive. So she kind of just went forward, did the whole chemotherapy, and it was a really odd situation. It was terrible actually because she did all that and she actually had her breast removed, kind of thing because of the situation. And then so she sorted that out, she was healing, and then 1 year later, the same clinic called her and said, "Hey, we apologize, but we missed you." And oh, exactly, right. I know all these questions, right? But it's based on things that different information and
Right.
or
Right.
just testing
Right.
process, right? They used to possibly just take out all the lymph
Wow.
or maybe,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
then, yeah, then of course, things ensue, like, I think there were lawsuits or that sort of thing happening for it,
Hmm. Hmm.
unfortunately, because you cannot undo the surgery, right, of
Right.
right?
Right.
And then I think the key point, to take away was that, always seek multiple opinions from all areas
Hmm.
for making
Hmm. Right.
it's an informed decision, right? So, but
Yeah.
of course, yeah, that just I was like, "Yeah, holy, yeah." So, thank you
Yeah.
very much, for sharing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, yeah, and, I think the key message here is that there's hope, okay? Everybody's
There's
circumstance,
always hope. There's always hope.
yeah, and the new information, new studies. Uh,
Yes.
well, segueing to my next question for you is, What made you feel the most empowering about sharing your story? Like, what's happened since you decided to share your story?
So everybody who's read the book has a different insight into it, and it's been fascinating to meet people, number one, that I maybe don't even know, right? There's plenty of people that I know that have read the book, but there's people that I don't know that have read the book. And it's always interesting to see what it is that they gained from it. I was recently at a show and there was a man, he and his wife had actually bought the book and he took it and read it first.
Oh,
And he read it cover to cover before she had a chance to read it. And he said, he came up to me and he said, "So my mother was like your father. Like my
mm,
mother was your father's character in my story." And it just was interesting. And so this conversation with him ensued that was about his childhood. And after he got through telling me how many times he cried and how moved he was by the book, which is always such a compliment to have men come up and say, and then I cried this part, and then I cried during this part, and it's very interesting to hear that from different men, and some of them that I don't know as well, and so he had insight into his life,
yeah,
having read the book that he didn't have before, and that's just such a gift, right? I mean, I had a conversation with him that I would have never had I not written that book.
yeah, yeah. And, this just shows that, while these might be her stories, untold being told, right? It,
Right.
it really isn't. It's a story that everybody can take away because
Well, we're all human, right? We're all human.
100%. And
Yeah.
as a human being, no matter what the circumstances and environment, there was a mother that gave birth to us, to being present and,
Right.
that, or that some sort of, being and stuff like that. And,
Right.
yeah, so I think that's, really, yeah, it's just beautiful how that the story not only touches one group, but it transcends to
Right.
groups
Right.
because there's something relational, right? Like that they can relatable for people, right? So, um,
Right.
yeah, you know, and I wanted to ask you, like, so that's the beautiful moment that you've just shared, right? So I now, how have you continued to choose empowerment and positivity over the years, even though there have been setbacks? And when I say that, I know that when you were pregnant, you were raising your son by yourself, and you encountered scornful glances and judgmental whispers in your conservative hometown, as you mentioned. So I don't. Did you want to go in and talk a little bit about that?
So yeah, so I think the long and short of that story is that at some point I had given it an opportunity, and the other piece of that was is that while I was in Louisville, Annie, who I had written a cookbook about before this and was actually touring with the cookbook when I found out that I was pregnant, she was alive and I was helping to care for her. I was helping with her family to care for her. And when she died, it was as if I was given the choice to leave and move on to go someplace else. And that was sort of the inciting incident for me that allowed me then to say, okay, do I want to stay here? And I didn't necessarily want to stay in Louisville. I still love Louisville. It's a beautiful town. It's where I'm from. It has all those things that our hometowns have for us, those people that we love and people that we're connected to. And yet, that's not where I wanted to live. And I had been in the mountains in the Catskills before that and really loved being in the mountains. Don't ask me why. I mean, so grew up in Kentucky, right? And Kentucky is known for hillbillies, right? And so all of my life, I resisted being called a hillbilly. All of my life, it was like I am not a hillbilly, and and I think that our school was like working to teach us so that we didn't have hillbilly talk and that we didn't come across as hillbillies. I think there was like this concerted effort. And then when we moved to North Carolina, and see it, I was the one. I was like, I want to be in the mountains. I was so determined I wanted to be in the mountains. And we were here for 2 or 3 months, and somebody said, because in North Carolina, you're either from the flat part of the state, because the state is really flat,
Oh,
on the other part of the state is very flat. So those are considered flatlanders. And this person came up to me and said, "So, are you a flatlander or a hillbilly?" And I was like, "Damn it. I'm a hillbilly."
yeah,
Just couldn't get away from it. I mean, here I moved, 2 states over, and I'm still a hillbilly.
so you
So
own it
I
now.
love the mountains. Don't ask me why. It just,
Yeah.
the first time that I lived in mountains, it felt like home to me. And so this was a concerted effort to move to a place that felt like home to me, in whatever that is that runs through our veins, that, makes Canada feel like home, or BC feel like home, or Oregon or California. I mean, you'll hear people that move from New York to California and they're like, "I will never go back."
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So yeah, so like that. So
The essence of that.
it was a concerted effort to get to where I felt at home.
Yeah, and it took time to build, I guess the courage and path to say, "Hey, no, this is exactly what I want," and then you're just gonna go for it. Now you kinda just laugh about it. I no, I love that. You gravitated towards what your soul, what your essence is telling you to go towards, and that's what you
Hmm.
want, and then you're there.
Right, right,
That's where you are right
right,
now. So that's so beautiful.
right,
Listening into to yourself, being connected to that center, right? Despite
right.
the challenges, the setback, and how people were perceiving the situation, right? You pushed through that, right? I did want to ask you, how did living on a farm affect Will, your son's life, and your parenting style, and being a solo on this journey, and then just managing a farm? How crazy!
Right. Well, living on a farm affected both of us, and I really feel like, looking back on it, I don't know that I was cognizant enough at the time to think this is the perfect place to raise a boy. I mean, I was to some extent a little selfish about it. It was like, if I'm going to do this alone, what can I do that will feed me while I'm raising him? And what happened was, both of us entered into this adventure, and I was re-raised in some ways. Like, it was
Mm,
a chance for me to re-raise myself and learn things that I didn't learn as a kid, and be a kid, right? And do all the fun stuff that kids get to do, because you don't get to, well, you do get to do them as an adult. However, when you're with a child, you have a chance to do things that you wouldn't think to do more often. as a parent, right? You get to go on the fun rides, and you get to go to the fun places, and you don't miss the fair when it comes to town. And there's things like that. So it was a chance to re-raise him, or to raise him, re-raise me, and we entered into this adventure, and I cannot say that I was very cognizant of that entering into it. It's just part of what happened, because what I wanted to do was raise alpacas. And
yeah,
so, we both were in the car for the ride, like,
yeah, yeah.
this is where we're going, and this is what it's like.
It's
So it's part of the ride. He was in a child seat in the back, and then eventually he was in the front seat with me. So, it really was a little bit like
it's like
that.
no choice, choice.
Yeah, no choice. And it was, so he was this gregarious child. He
Yeah,
still is. He's this,
yeah,
he's a great, well, he's not a child anymore. He's a young man.
yeah.
But he was gregarious as a kid. And we would drive from Kentucky to North Carolina and stop at Cracker Barrel, and he would go around and invite anybody sitting alone to come join us. I mean,
Oh,
he was
wow.
that kind of kid, right?
Yeah,
So a small town where he could roam and go talk to people and it was safe.
yeah.
And he had that space, and a farm where he had the space to be outside and interact with things outside, and dogs, and all of the stuff that happened as we went on was the perfect place to raise him.
That's just this just sounds so beautiful. What a perfect childhood, I have to say, because I remember growing up, I was not allowed to have a pet like a dog or anything. So I had to ask for it. I waited so many years. Like it's just so different, because I'm
Mhm.
from Taiwan originally, and we lived in city, we lived in an apartment, and no, you're not supposed to have dogs because it's not like an open thing when you're out on the street, everybody's walking their dog, like, it's just not that space 'cause it's so
Exactly. Yeah.
in city,
Yeah.
and then so how I ended up with my first dog was I just kinda snuck it in. So
Oh, you
yeah,
did.
yeah, actually, yeah, this is never been
How
related.
long was the dog there before your parents knew?
Okay, so I gotta share you the snippet of my story for that because I love animals, and your book is called Farm Animals. We love animals, right? So, so essentially, this is what happened. So I was roaming around, walking around on the Sunday afternoon. I went to this flower market that's situated on a bridge. So a lot of people, a lot of traffic, people sell stuff, vendors come.
Hmm.
And I saw this lady, this nice lady, and she's holding this puppy, and then she's got like more than like, a dozen animals, like cats and dogs and puppies in front of her. And then I was just so drawn to the one that she was holding, right? So I kept holding it and I wanted. And then and then I didn't know what to do. I just wanted it. I just wanted it.
Aw.
So then she told me her story. So she's a teacher and she loves animals so much, even though she lives in an apartment. She and her husband, they take in these strays because there's a lot of stray animals, unfortunately, in Asia because people buy them at a street market when they're puppies and it looks really cute. And then they go home and then it grows really big in a few months down the road and they don't know what to do because they don't have the space.
Hmm.
I'm not saying everybody does this, of course, but then the next step is okay, we'll just leave it out in the streets. And that's why they're stray dogs,
Aw.
right? So it's
Hmm.
very unfortunate. So she takes them in and she brings them on Sundays where she can to see who will adopt, right? Okay. And not everybody is open to adoption. I don't know how that has changed and shifted overseas in Asia, but hopefully it did. And they also have a program that I've heard over the years is that where people travel there, they can help bring a pet back for somebody to that already decided
Mm-hmm.
to adopt. So that's a great program.
Hmm.
Um, but anyhow, so I went back again, and then she said, "Okay." I said, "My mom's not gonna let me have this dog, right?" She's like, "Okay, here's the thing. How about you take it home? If she says no, you bring it back to me. Do not leave it out in the street. You bring it right back to me, okay? 'Cause I take her back." And I said, "Okay." So I take Toffee, right? Toffee was like a mixed mutt of like who knows what she was, but she looked like a German Shepherd puppy, and she was medium size, about 22 to 25 pounds max.
Oh,
And she was this big, so I took her home, and then my mom was she was back in Canada at the time. I was like, "Yes." So so then Toffee was, she essentially mute, um, for the first 6 months, and I was very afraid because I was like, "Aren't dogs supposed to bark?" She didn't bark at all, right? And then slept with her, I did everything with her, took her everywhere, snuck her in on Sky trains, at stores, everywhere, okay, I did everything. She was my everything. And then my mom came back on the 6th month when Toffee was 6 months old, and then my brother calls me up, he's like, "Hey," and then I hear Toffee barking crazily in the back. I was like, "Oh my god, that's so amazing." He's like, "Mom's back, she's really mad. She's really mad on the dog." But yeah, and then fast forward, she was really upset, but then she, like, grew really fond and she loved Toffee, like, so much, right? So but Toffee's passed away at age 17. Yeah, she lived a really go lo long life, but,
Uh-huh.
yeah, I had to share that
Aw, that's so great. That's so great.
comparing, childhoods, like, yeah,
Right?
I wish I lived on the farm.
Right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, well, I brought baby birds in, and my dad would, invariably in the spring, like this time of
yeah,
year, would be out cutting grass and would shear the top off the rabbit thing. And so he'd come in with four little baby bunnies. And in fact, my junior year of high school, I think it
yeah.
was my junior year, and I was in biology. Yeah, it was biology. And my dad brought these four baby bunnies. And the teacher said, if you can keep one of them alive, just one
Yeah.
alive until the final exam, you get an A.
Oh,
And
wow.
I was up every night feeding these baby bunnies. And like, by the time it was all over, the last one lived through the day of the final exam. I ended up taking the final exam anyway, and I think I did maybe did well on it. I don't know. I wasn't a great student, but it like every one of those babies, those bunnies died in my hands. Like I was,
Yeah,
what, 16, 17
yeah.
years old. And I'm like, every single one of them died in my hands. It was so sad. And it like every year that's what would happen. And that year, my mother took me to the vet to get the right kind of formula to feed the bunnies and the right, we had all the right stuff. Still didn't work. It's really hard to keep them alive. And now I know that there's actually, it has to do with their digestive system. You have to add a certain kind of bacteria to help them digest, to to get them through that. There's a whole scientific thing to it. But anyway, I didn't know that back then. So,
Wow, yeah, and that reminds me, actually had several, rabbits in my lifetime, like, the first one died, and that was probably, like, the years and years ago. My mom didn't know anything, right? So I was
right,
managing it, but, how do I know? There was no internet, there was nobody to ask, right? And that, that thing that you just talked about, like, I didn't know about that until we talked about
right.
but so very likely that that rabbit was experiencing she unfortunately passed away, and then later on, I had other bunnies where I was so it was kinda like you brought me back memories too, like, I literally got off school and I would spend 3 to 4 hours with my rabbit just in the room training for playing, fixing her house, kind of thing, my to the point where my mom actually got jealous. Yeah,
That's too funny. That's too
it's
funny.
it's really funny, and I was not allergic to, rabbit hair a Angora or something at the time, right? Like, it was interesting, until after I stopped for a few years, and all of a sudden, I'm allergic, so I don't know what that
Oh,
is.
interesting, interesting,
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
Yeah.
so, I thought it might be timely to, with your permission, to share that video clip about,
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yep.
an apple farm, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
apple
Apple Hill Farm. So
farm.
it's
Okay, so let's
yeah,
navigate.
it's the Farm Bureau video.
Alright. Oop, give me a second here. Farm Bureau video. I'm just looking for the right browser that had it open up. Okay, so we're gonna click open right now. Yeah, I thought it'd be interesting to show everybody what your farm is about. I think this is the one, right?
Yes, I think that's it.
Okay, perfect. So we're gonna pause here and oops, and then just open this up. And you're able to see my screen?
Yep. There you go.
Perfect. And maybe I'll just ask you to mute for this segment and I'll keep my microphone for the sound on. Thank you. Oh no. Oh, I'm gonna start this again.
You're good girls. Come here, guys. Why do you think agritourism is so important in agriculture? People are generations removed from the people who lived on a farm. You can go to the grocery store and you can buy anything, but you don't know how it's grown or how it's produced or how it's made. So agritourism and agriculture, it's important because people really need to see that. And I think they're hungry for it. Hi, what's going on? It's hard to find someone more passionate about agritourism than Lee Rankin. As we get busier with email and Facebook and Instagram and cell phones and all the things that we're juggling in a day, to go back to a farm and really ground ourselves in that experience is important. She's on North Carolina Farm Bureau's Agritourism Advisory Committee. She's president of the North Carolina Agritourism Networking Association, and she owns and operates an agritourism farm at the top of a mountain in Watauga County. We figure we've had over 100,000 that have come and toured the farm. Not just come, but toured the farm. Hello. Rankin didn't start Apple Hill Farm with the intention of educating the public about animal agriculture. I met an alpaca and fell in love. That was the goal, was to have alpacas and have this very nice alpaca lifestyle. But it was the people coming that then gave us the idea. Apple Hill now offers daily tours, opportunities for people to learn about not only alpacas, but also Angora goats, horses, cattle, and livestock guardian dogs. As they walk around the farm and they learn about the animals, they learn stories about the animals, all of those things, they're like lit up. It's a connection. We're hungry for connection. Rankin also hopes to make connections by sharing her personal story in a new book. It's a memoir of starting the farm. It's the story of why, how I started the farm. And one of my goals in writing it was I wanted people to feel the cold of the floor in the barn when I was up all night with an animal. I wanted them to feel it and have the experience because people don't have that experience.
Paperback is available in early 2024, and later in the year, Rankin will invite people to enjoy another new experience. Farm stays.
We took over the 1920s farmhouse, and it's the original farmhouse to this farm. It's a beautiful house, and we have cows down there.
So has this morphed into what you thought it would be?
I can't even imagine what it's morphed into. I look at it, I wake up and I walk around, I'm like, this is amazing. Like, how did I, how did I do this? How did I come to this land in the middle of the mountains and the wind and the snow and the rain and the sunrises and start something that wasn't here? I love doing every part of what I'm doing.
911 emergency, what are you reporting? I just feel away from home
Sorry.
because
Oh, I can't.
There we go.
There you are. Okay. Cool.
Yeah, it just it was there, I think some other videos was playing. So cancel that 911 emergency. It was irrelevant. It wasn't related to her. But what a beautiful video. And can you tell us a little bit more about that? Was that you did it? It was done in association with the Farm Bureau.
With the North Carolina Farm Bureau. And so they do videos about some of their farmers that are around the state. And so they came and did that. It was obviously Christmas time. It was done 2023 as the book was just, the hardback book was just coming out. And we were waiting for the soft cover to come out. And, but it's great because it gives you sort of a feeling of, especially the mountaintopness of the farm.
Yeah.
Because when I had the idea to raise alpacas in the mountains, I very innocently said I wanted a mountaintop farm, and people were like, Lee, they don't have farms on mountaintops. And I said, okay. I was like, I want a mountaintop farm. And so that's what we ended up getting led to, was this property. And so it's interesting, when I was looking, when Will and I were looking for property,
Yeah.
my sort of mantra as I would come up against the doubts, which were, you've lost your ever living mind, like you've like totally broken with reality, and this is an insane, what are you thinking? What are you doing? I would hear, if it's the right thing to do, I will find a piece of property I can't say no to. And then we found this. And so here we are. And so really the story is, and that's part of this book, is that the synchronicities in the story that led us to this place to raise alpacas with the idea that we were not going to be open to the public. We had no idea of doing that. And it just morphed into that. And now we, have, 70, 80, 90, 100 people, depending on the day, that come and tour and get to see the farm and experience it, and see the animals and feed the Angora goats. Those were Angora goats, the ones that look like, somebody called them lamb doodles one day. They look like
They're all
a cross between a lamb and a doodle. And they're a fiber animal just like the alpacas. So we have the alpacas, which are a fiber animal. We shear those once a year for their fiber. And then we have the Angora goats, who are also a fiber animal, one of the most prolific, or the most prolific fiber animal. We shear those twice a year. So we're getting ready to shear those in a couple of weeks. So we'll shear those, and then we don't shear the alpacas till June. Anyway, so it's fascinating. It's just this story that keeps morphing and changing, and
it's so beautiful. I think I'm very curious about the sharing process. Like, how long does it take? Is it days, or is it hours, or weeks, or how's that
so
work?
we do all of the goats in generally one day, and we do all the alpacas in one day. It does not take very long at all. The shearing process takes, I don't know, 3 to 5 minutes maybe to shear all the fiber off. They
Yeah.
do it really quickly.
Yeah.
It's really getting the animal to the shearer, right, and cleaning up after each animal. We actually keep, when we shear both the Angora goats and the alpacas,
Yeah.
we gather up all the fiber with every animal. So each animal has a bag or 2 bags of fiber with their name on it. So that then when we go and have it turned into yarn and you come to the store and you buy yarn, you're buying yarn that is Aspen's yarn or Tequila's yarn or Frosty's yarn or one of the animals' names, and it's a different color for all the different animals. So so it has a relationship to the animal.
Wow, that's sounds so fascinating. So thank you for having that video, and it was such a great video, and just we kind of just
We have
travel.
to thank Farm Bureau. We have to thank
Yes,
Farm
thank
Bureau.
you.
They brought their drone, and
Yeah,
it was probably so the Farm Bureau film crew was
yeah.
from Raleigh, where it's
Okay.
always 15 to 20 degrees warmer, and it was like 17 degrees and 40-mile-an-hour winds that day. I mean, it
Yeah.
was so cold and they were frozen. It was interesting. It's always never fails when you plan to do a video that it's.
So, oh, so talking about the weather, like, when is the best time to visit the farm? Like, if somebody wanted,
Anytime's a great time, but
yeah,
our busier season is June to October.
okay,
October is a really big season for us because the leaves change and the mountains are just ablaze with color from the leaves changing. And summer is beautiful up here. It's 15 to 20 degrees warmer or cooler than it is in the cities in North Carolina. So a lot of people come up to get away from the heat and the humidity because it's always just really nice up here. But
yeah.
then we're also busy at other times of the year, like between Christmas and New Year's is a really busy time. And right now is a busy time because Florida and North Carolina are on spring break. So we've had a lot of people coming during spring break. They'll come up here for the week and do something up here and.
That sounds
So
really fun.
yeah. So
Yeah. No, and okay, so that's very exciting. And so to the audience, well, I will be sharing the links to Lee's websites and whatnot, so you can learn more and reach out and check out her book as well. So my next question for you, I think this is tying up nicely, is that if you could tell yourself, your younger self, anything, what would it be? Having to live up to this point now.
that everything is going to work out great, not to worry. So many times when we're younger, we just like are so worried it's not this or we're wasting that and it all works exactly how it's supposed to work. And that I don't think we have that wisdom along the way.
I think that's so very true because when we were younger, I mean, still, even as adults, you want things to happen fast or certain things, but it's
Hmm.
not coming. But sometimes they come in a different way or have a different outcome, or
Right.
and it's that synchronicity that you're talking about, the timing, right? Sometimes it needs to work through its time so that it
Hmm.
can arrive to
Hmm.
where it needs to be.
Hmm.
And it can be multitude of situations and circumstances, but the situation itself has to mature to a stage, and
Right.
it's like a student has to study to learn the knowledge, and even ourselves we need to cultivate and practice and change and train whatever that is, right? And then
Hmm.
get there
Hmm.
so that when the timing
Hmm.
right, things align, they meet together and things
Hmm.
happen, right? So yeah, no, that's,
Right.
yeah, that's exactly what it is. Everything will be okay. You just have to have patience, right? So
Right.
I love,
Right.
thank you. And now I wanted to ask you, how did writing and sharing your story process affect your healing and transformation journey? So I'm comparing the point where you didn't write about this, you haven't written this book to after,
Right.
to yeah.
Right. So writing it was, first of all, writing the book was a total transformational journey. Just the process of writing, and going back and having the insights that I had. So when I started telling the story, and obviously I did a little bit of research, I used journals, I used calendars, I used events and times when things had happened. There were so many insights that I had about how this had unfolded. And I started the book with a question, which is this sort of what, how, why did I do this?
Mm,
From the standpoint of looking back after the farm was established and we were touring people around, and people would ask this sort of amorphous what, why, how did you do this? And I didn't know. I couldn't answer really, nor could have I answered in the moment. It was such a long answer. But when I went back and looked at it, there were things like the day that I found out I was pregnant, I was also leaving to drive to North Carolina for a book signing with the
Mm.
cookbook. And it was Thanksgiving Day was the day that I found out I was pregnant. And I literally left that night and I did a book signing in Blowing Rock, North Carolina, which is 45 minutes away from here, the day after I found out I was pregnant. And I had never I kind of knew on one hand, but I didn't. And I had not nailed it down quite so succinctly that those two things were that close together. Um, and I had done two book signings here while I was obviously while I was pregnant. Um, I did another one in May. It was the last book signing that I did. And while I was here in May, somebody gave me the name of a restaurant that is just kind of down the road from us. It's no longer there, but it was just down the road from us. And I had driven to it and I'd had this very strange feeling. I'd actually written about it
Yeah.
in my journal. And I wasn't sure it was because I was pregnant or it was the place or I'd gone to a restaurant and I was a certified chef and maybe I was going to get into the restaurant world because I didn't know exactly what all I was going to be doing when I moved. And it was very distinct feeling that I had never had before. And when we came and looked at the house, when I looked at it the first time, we came from a different direction.
Mm.
When we came and looked at it the second time, I realized it was off that road. And so that was another piece of the synchronicity. And I don't know, as I go through my life, there are lots of things, details and insights that come at me, but it's when I sit down and write about them that they all sort of come together. And, it's like the ingredients are there, but the cake's not made.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like that. Like I've gathered ingredients of synchronicities along the way, and it was in writing them that they really pulled together into a much more cohesive piece.
Yeah, no, that's the perfect way to capture that. So constantly, as human beings navigating through life, we're collecting tools, lessons, pieces here and there. And
Hmm.
when the timing aligns, right? That's when you put things together and then leads you to where you begin writing this story and sharing your journey, right? And then,
Right,
you know,
right, right.
continually healing and transforming your journey overall, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
that's really beautiful and well captured. And I wanted to ask you, what message do you have for women and men around the globe? Like, yeah, how do
So I think the message that I really have is that we always feel like doing something new is this insurmountable, scary, big hill to climb.
Mm.
The truth of the matter is that we do it all the time, right? Like you move to a place, you start a job, you decide, I don't like this apartment, I'm gonna get another apartment, right? And then you go through that process of moving. So many of those things that we do are exactly the same. We do it. It's okay. So you find the apartment and then you get the electricity and you sign up for whatever it is you need to sign up with around that apartment. You figure out where you're going to park and then you find out, oh, if I turn right out of here, there's a grocery store down here and that becomes your favorite grocery store. Or you decide you don't like that one. So you drive the other way and you find a grocery store that way. But we go through that process of creating something new in our lives all the time. And it does seem scary. And I felt the same way when I was making this move. But really, it's the stepping forward that gets us to where we're going. It's like we do it one step at a time. We can't go from living in Louisville, Kentucky to living on a mountaintop in North Carolina with alpacas
Yeah,
in one step. It's always a group of little steps, right?
yeah,
And there's always support along the way or resistance, right? Which may mean that's not the right thing to do or it's not the right time to do it.
mhm.
So we can really trust that we're going to be guided along the way.
That's very well put because thank you for sharing, tips and your experience about how to navigate through life and the steps to push through when you mentioned the fear that is holding you back. We're already
Hmm.
constantly aware and doing nonstop, because just time keeps going and pushing through already without realizing,
Right,
right?
right.
those baby moments and baby microseconds that we're moving forward. Things are
Yeah.
changing into a
Especially in this day and age, it feels like things are moving so quickly and changing so quickly. And our ability to incorporate change is, I think, increasing to some extent.
yeah, and so, like, in terms of that, like, how do we have courage no matter, like, where you are, who you are, and what circumstances, we're in? Because, in a lifetime, we experience different situations, traumas, hurt, sadness, grief,
Hmm.
heartache, separations, life and death, birth, happy things too, of course, but how do you pick yourself up? Like, what are some tips that, that has helped you?
So as you know from reading the book, I feel things really deeply. When I go through things, I feel them really deeply. But I'm also very hopeful, and as some people would say, probably Pollyanna. Like I'm always looking at the brighter side. And there's an element of leaning into what's going on, that which is where the courage is, right? If we can experience the difficult thing, we create the ability to create the next beautiful thing. So it's in experiencing what's hard that we learn to create what's not hard, right? We get the chops. We're exercising the muscle. It's like you go to the gym and you exercise to build the muscle, and it's hard, but then that's the thing that allows you to take the walk
Yeah.
or to do the next thing or to be that person that you want to be. So I think that it's once again, I think it's inherently in the situations and leaning in to what's going on, and not to diminish how difficult things were. And as you know, in reading the book, I mean, there were so many things that were terrifying and difficult. And I look back on it and I think, how in the world did I take that next step forward? And part of it was I had a child. And so when you have a child, they wake up the next morning and they want breakfast, so it's not like it wasn't like I got a chance to wallow in bed for very long and not deal with it. I mean, I had to get up and move on to the next thing. And with animals, it's the same thing. If you have a herd of animals and you have a horrible thing happen, and then you've got to get up and feed the next day, or you got to get the feed the next day, and there's an element of that, I think, that we all go through in our lives. And I think it's, I mean, I don't know how you are, but there's times that there's things going on in the world, and it's like, well, how can I just eat breakfast here? Like, these people are suffering, and how can I sit and eat breakfast while people are going through horrible stuff over here? It is that dichotomy. And I had a child, so I didn't really have a choice but to keep going. But there were definitely times I thought about it. I mean, anybody else, there were times that they would have just packed the boxes and left and been like, I'm out of here, you know?
Yeah.
And even when we had this horrible accident with the alpacas, a lot of people wouldn't have carried on, but I had one alpaca that lived, and I had got a buddy for him before he was the only one. So then I had two. And then what do you do, right? Then I'm getting rid of an alpaca that I'm now really bonded to. So, um, anyway, yeah, I don't know if I answered the question,
Oh,
but it,
that was beautiful what you just shared. Yeah. So many things came to mind. Like, you talked about that thing about going for the experience and experiencing, right? Because how do you know? And what came to mind loud and clear was, it's like, how do you know love if you didn't know hate, right? How do
right,
you know light
right.
and then day and night, kind of thing? So there has to be a contrast of experience to experience the other side, because it wouldn't be fully authentic to say I love, but you have no idea what hate is. Of course you
Hmm.
love,
Hmm.
right? But now you know, right?
Right,
That's why
right.
the other, you know, even though they might be opposites, but they're counterparts in some ways to contrast and balance each other out, right? So that's
Right.
really beautiful. And you talk about how, because being a mother, you cannot just shut down and walk away, right? So, and that's so powerful as a parent to a child, just focusing on the energy of what you need to do in front of you, right? And I feel like what really came to mind here was that even if you don't have kids, when you encounter challenges and setbacks, and finding that courage means you can be your own child. Take care of
Hmm.
yourself as your
Hmm.
own child.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And don't just shut down and, take acknowledge that, what you're going through, but there's no need to be all alone in it kind of thing, shut down and not go for new experiences, right? So, which
Right.
leads me
Right.
to, wanting to talk
Right.
about how do we help others and offer support if people are experiencing self-doubt, whether it's in your life, health, or, career kind of thing. So, yeah, like, do you have some?
I think
Yeah.
listening is a very underrated skill, which is to allow people to talk about it. Um, I mean, I use writing that way. If I am feeling a lot of self-doubt, if I can write it, then it kind of has a place to live that's not inside me, which helps me then see what the next step is. And I think that we can do that for one another, right?
Yeah.
You know how it is when you go through something and you call a friend and you tell them, and they're not really listening.
Yeah.
And so then you call another friend and you tell them, but they really listen. And then you're like, okay, I'm done.
Yes.
Okay, now I'm going to go fold laundry or whatever it is, whatever the next thing is.
Yeah.
But it's like if we can find a way to be heard and to communicate and connect either with ourselves or somebody else, I think it always helps.
That's so true too. In certain ways, I see it as a form of validating. Validating not as in like they'll give you solutions, and sometimes that's not what we're seeking for. We just want the
Mm-mm.
sense of
We
someone
just need somebody to hear it.
and being heard, right? So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's yeah,
Yeah.
that's so true. And yeah, I think that's a very great tip. So in any time that we experience these doubtful or situations and setbacks, we find ways to let out what we need to tell. And it could be talking to somebody or,
Hmm.
as I mentioned, journaling, writing it down, and just putting
Right.
it on paper and so that it's away from your mind, it's off, it's somewhere, but it's safe,
Right.
and so that you can
Right.
take the next step. So that's really beautiful. And yeah, no, I think that's wonderful. And I think at the end of it, I was going to ask you who should read your book, but we already talked about that. And I think this your book, it extends to everybody that is interested in animals and learning about life and farm. It really gave me a firsthand experience of what a day is like for Lee here, and I thought that was really well written and very well detailed captured, and beautifully. And it also made me feel all your emotions to the capacity that I was able to, and
Hmm.
really just live through you, all the pains and the love and the challenges and how brave you are because you're such a beautiful soul and beautiful woman and how strong. And I just thought that was wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 Yeah. So I wanted to ask you: is there anything that you want to add? In terms of like, for example, your other projects, things that are happening. How do we get a copy of your book?
So the thing that's happening right now at the farm is it's spring. which means which means that every trip to the feed store is dangerous because there's
Oh,
little chicks there going cheep 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 cheep
oh,
and I want to bring them all home, right? So it's spring and we are making plans to plant the garden and to add things to the farm. We're scheduling out for the summer for some of the things that we do through the summer through our season, not just the tours, but we do a barn quilt painting class with a local artist. We do goat yoga with the baby goats. So the goats are due to have their kids the end of May. So
yeah.
it's always an exciting time, right? We've been through winter and survived snow and wind and cold and ice and some mud recently. So this is always an exciting time around the farm. We're adding new team members so that we have this tour guides that we need for the summer
Yeah.
when it gets busier, and craft shows that we're going to go to with our yarn. And so all of those things. And we have the book. So there will be book signings as part of that. And the place to get the book, where it's available on Amazon, it's available on Kindle, it's also available through our farm store. So we have and you're going to post the link, but on our website, we have a farm store and you can purchase alpaca socks. We sell a lot of alpaca socks. We sell an alpaca dryer ball that is, you put in the dryer and it speeds up the drying time because it helps wick the moisture away and it cuts down the static electricity. So it does not require dryer sheets. So it gets you away from some of the chemicals that you might put in your dryer to that we've all been taught to put into our dryer. So it's a more natural way to help dry your sheets. You can put essential oils on it if you want to scent your sheets. So we have things like that. So there's all sorts of things on the website, from alpaca socks to gloves to scarves to hats to yarn if you're a knitter or crocheter. One of our events that we do during the summer is knitting with the alpacas. We have a little field inside the field that we can go in and sit with the alpacas and do activities. And so we'll have that going on. So you can come on an afternoon and bring your knitting project and come knit with the alpacas and feel the energy of the alpacas. So we have, things like that that are happening. So
That sounds so that sounds so fun, so relaxing too, and very exciting. All these activities. I do have two questions. So the first one was going back a little bit about the goat yoga.
yes.
So what was that about?
So
Yeah,
goat yoga, so when we have our kids and they're really little, they're still little,
yeah.
we have a yoga instructor who comes, we go to the same area and we do yoga. And then the last 15 minutes of the class is goat snuggles and pictures and lots of laughter. So it's a little bit like laugh yoga. And the goats are constantly jumping on people or eating their hair or eating their pants or all these different things. It's loads of fun. It is a huge oxytocin release. Like everybody leaves like so excited and happy.
Love it.
It's always loads of fun. And we do it inside if it's rainy or if the ground's really wet. So everybody brings their mats and does yoga. It's on Friday nights at 5 o'clock. A lot of farms are doing it. So even if you're not near us, look for something like that. Farms all over the place are open for people to come and experience different aspects of the farm. So not everybody is in North Carolina. I know that. But go to your closest farm, see if there's an alpaca farm nearby that you can have an experience of alpacas or meet them or feel their fiber, buy products, those kinds of things. So
No, that's beautiful because prior to, connecting with you and reading your book, I have no knowledge of farms really, right?
right,
Yeah, because it's just not part of my childhood, but that doesn't mean I'm not interested, right? I
right,
just don't know
right,
what to look for. And, just based on things and images that I've seen in my life, like farms are, you don't usually go there. There's probably not normal activities that everybody can participate in that happens, right? But in this case,
right.
wow, like you share a multitude of different aspects. So fun. The second thing is, I meant to ask you earlier about alpacas. I think they spit, right?
They can.
They
They
can.
can. They
How
can.
often does that happen? Like, and it's spit.
Not very often. Not very often. So it's kind of a defensive maneuver that they spit. So
Yeah.
if they feel challenged in some way, they might spit. And they often spit. Let's see if I can describe this. So they often spit over food. So
Oh,
if I'm standing at the fence and I'm feeding an alpaca and I have 2 hands worth of food and there's 2 alpacas,
yeah.
they're going to spit at each other to get the food, right? So they're going to be like competitive over the food. And
Ah,
what often happens is that it hits their nasal passage right when they spit at each other. And the guy who gets nailed in the nasal passage, and they can do it to themselves as well, but not meaning to, but they can't breathe through their nose, right? So they have to open their mouth. So then they go, and then they can't eat. So
oh,
the guy who spits first sometimes gets the food first,
okay.
right? So it's a offensive maneuver between them. And sometimes the people have had an experience of llamas in the zoo
Yeah.
that are probably sort of caged into an area and they're not necessarily really well behaved and they've probably been challenged by lots of people and they just learn to spit and it's just a reaction. And it's smells horrible. It is like,
I didn't
it
know.
is literally, so they have three stomachs, right? So it is the juice from their stomach.
Yeah.
And they like they've got these really long necks. So
Yeah.
they like, they bring it up and you can see it. You can see it come up their necks, and then you can see their little their cheeks get all puffed out. And that means, and then their ears go back, and then that's when they're about to hawk tui at you.
And oh my God, I can only imagine that. And I think that the spit is very is strong force, right? Like you can go really far. So if
Yes,
you really
yes,
saw the motion and you
yes,
started running
yes,
and they're
yes.
you're
It's not, and it is, and I have to say, so I've been spit on numerous
oh,
times, sometimes when I'm doing, herd maintenance kind of stuff, and it feels emotionally like it would feel if somebody spit on you. Like it's
okay.
very offensive. It's like really hard not to be offended when they
Oh,
do it. I mean, it's like, I know you're mad, but it's like really hard not to take it personally, because
yeah.
it's
That's
it's
just the
just
nature,
very,
right? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So anyway.
No, no, thank you for sharing. That's so interesting. And you mentioned that it smells really bad. So how do you get it rid of it? Do you have to use a special wash or something to get it?
No, it just washes off, but yeah, yeah.
Okay. Well,
So,
that's fantastic
yeah,
to
yeah,
know.
but it does not happen very often. I mean, it's been a long time since I've been spit at.
Yeah.
So,
I'll
um,
be, no, I'm still very excited and very open to visiting alpaca farm. I'll hopefully be able to.
yeah. And we don't, one of the things that we don't do here at our farm is we don't do a lot of feeding over the fence, because we have so many people that come, and that can encourage that kind of behavior. So we try very hard not to
Yeah.
bring that on in our alpacas. And it also has to do a lot with how they're handled.
Yeah.
We've all been trained with a different way of handling that's very gentle,
Yeah.
and we don't often get offensive behavior from our alpacas. So
Yeah. No, that's
yeah,
that's so interesting, so fun.
I
It's
know. So they're very different. But they're very docile animals. They're very in tune.
yeah.
And usually when people are here, there's a moment that they have with the alpacas as they're in the field. And I'll have a tour out, and everybody just kind of goes silent. And you're like, okay, we're having the moment, right? They're having this pastoral moment with these really, I think they're ascended beings. And so that's the experience that most people have of them, because they're very different and unique, and they date back they're in the Andes mountains, so they date back to Incan times, and they were part of many religious rituals. Like there are pipes that were replicas of llamas or alpacas. Their fiber was used for royalty.
Mm,
So they are very high energy and highly thought of in the cultures that they come from. So
yeah.
they're very special in that way. So I don't want everybody to leave with the idea of them spitting. I want you to leave with the high energy of them. We've had
Yeah.
groups before that come and meditate with them, and
Wow.
it's interesting when we did it. So we had this big group, and they were in a circle, and they were meditating.
Yeah.
And then when and the alpacas were all sort of around the meditators, and they were watching what was going on. And when the meditation was over and everybody kind of came out of meditation, the alpacas just like wandered off. They were like, okay, it's done. We're good.
Sure.
And so they're very in tune in that way, energetically.
Yeah.
They're very high beings.
I feel like they're beautiful, gentle creatures.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned that in your book and
Mm-hmm.
how your connections with them,
Yeah.
and they seem to understand you. Of course, they don't speak our language, right? But uh,
Right.
and I just find that fascinating. I actually see online that people have them as pets or something like that. Yeah. So, but I just think like, yeah, it's just
Yeah.
a wonderful creature. How do you take care of alpaca? Like, if you have, like, is there a special way to wash it or?
So generally, if you're wearing something, you mean like alpaca clothing?
Yeah, clothing, yeah.
Yeah, so if you have a scarf, generally alpaca, if it's 100% alpaca, it is literally just natural fiber. It
Mhm.
may be dyed, but it's natural fiber woven together. And it doesn't, in sock form, it wicks moisture away, but it doesn't hold anything. So unless it gets dirty, you
Yeah,
really don't need to wash it. Like cotton soaks everything in, every odor, every whatever, right? You wear a cotton shirt and you go to a fire pit and you smell like the fire pit when you leave a cotton shirt. But alpaca doesn't hold odor in that same way. So you mostly don't need to wash it. You can hand wash it, you can dry clean it. But it will felt if you put it in the washing machine and use any amount of agitation with it. So
That's a wonderful share because
yeah, I could do a whole segment on that.
yeah, like 101, right? Yeah, I did not take care of my alpaca. I wish I've spoken to you earlier.
Because like like wool, if you put a wool sweater in the wash and it
Yeah.
shrinks down, it felts. That's a felting process. And
Uh,
I used to make hats. I used to knit hats. It was a pattern that I used to knit. Well, I still do, but it's a pattern that you knit and it makes a hat.
yeah,
And the way that I turn it into a hat from just this piece of fabric is I put it in the washing machine and I
yeah.
let the washing machine felt it. And
Oh,
then I stretch and shape it.
wow. That's
So
fun. Yeah. I can't wait
it's
to
called wet felting. It's called wet felting.
well, what and is that an activity that happens in your farm when people
We
come?
have not done that for years, no, because it's, you've got to knit it and then put it in the washing machine.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's a harder one to show. But we do sell kits that are needle felting, where
Oh,
you're using a needle that has barbs on it
yeah,
to felt the fabric. So you're basically taking some some fiber down and then bringing different fiber up, and that combines the fiber. So the felt that we played with as kids, did you all in your culture have felt that you cut up and you glued together and you made, yeah. So that is fiber that
yeah.
is put through a machine with thousands of needles that just punch through it. That's the same thing that we do in a needle felting
Oh,
project.
wow.
Exact same thing, only we're doing it with one needle or maybe four or five at the same time, as opposed to a machine that has thousands.
Wow. That's a beautiful share. So thank you very much for having providing a glimpse of that, because
Yeah, there's so much. There's so much.
yeah, it's just
So
life is very fascinating, and I'm so glad that you wrote this book and shared with everybody about your journey, and then how that yeah, it really it's very empowering, inspiring, and uplifting. So I loved it. I was cheering for you in there.
thank you. Thank you.
The
Thank
way,
you so
yeah,
much. This has been great. This has been awesome. It's
yeah.
awesome to
So thank you for that, and thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate your presence here and your shares. And yeah, I'm just wishing you a very happy long weekend. And
yes.
thank you.
All right. Thank you. Happy Easter.
Yes, happy Easter. Yes, go celebrate. So take care and bye for now. Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Bye.